boy puts a marble on the ground. The marble automatically rolled along the ground. The father, Park Dong-won, suspected that the house was tilted, but the house was new to him a few days ago. South Park called the neighbors. He asked them to see if the doors and windows were tight when they were opened and closed, and to check the tilt of the building, but no one took it seriously. Unbeknownst to them, a crack had appeared in the ground around the building. The people inside the building didn't realize the danger was imminent. Early that morning, Tai, who lives in 401, was playing with the grandfather across the street on the roof. Suddenly there was a loud bang. There was also a violent shaking under his feet. The ground began to split, and the walls began to crumble. Park, who was sitting at home, thought he was blind. He held onto the painting on the wall, but the shaking became stronger and stronger. The glass cracked and the building began to fall. Tai shouted for the old man across the street to call the police, but the man was dumbfounded by what he saw. Then the power lines collapsed. The whole building plunged. Eventually it got stuck in a narrow area. By the time Tai sat up again, he was hundreds of meters from the ground in a deep hole. Suddenly a car fell on top of the building. He was about to be hit. Tai put his feet up and braced himself. He managed to kick the car away. The house starts to fall again. This time the car fell through the roof of the building. It went through the balcony and into the house. The people in the car rapped on the window for help. Park took a good look. Inside was his colleague Shuai, who had come for dinner last night. He tugged on the door of the car to try to rescue him, but the door handle was pulled off. At that moment, the car started to slide backwards again. Shuai was inside and cursed at Park. He then tried desperately to pull on the door himself, but the same thing happened. But the car finally got stuck on the edge of the wall. Shuai climbed out of the car window, and then they found Mei in another room. They found Xiao Mei, a colleague who was trapped. The group then went to the roof of the building. They tried to call for help from outside, but it was too far from the ground. There was no signal at all. At this point Tai's son suggested, "We should gather some survival supplies first." So everyone got to work. Meanwhile, a search and rescue operation is underway outside, but as soon as the rescuers went down, the ground around them started to collapse again. The search had to be suspended, so the drones were used instead, but the sinkhole was already more than 250 meters underground. The drone soon loses its signal and falls down. The people underground were excited to see a drone search. They were excited. This means there is hope for them. Suddenly a violent shaking begins beneath their feet. The building stuck in the sky. It starts to fall again. The ground tilts. Xiao Shuai was about to fall. At the moment of crisis, Xiao Mei saw the cable above her. She immediately climbs upwards. Suddenly a rock rolled down in front of her. Little did she know that she would use her hidden skills. She dodged it with a jump. She then handed one end of the cable to Xiao Shuai. She took the other end and went down around the anchor. Tai was also at the bottom to help pull the rope. Suddenly the rope broke. Tai, who was standing on the edge, he leaned backwards uncontrollably. The man loses his footing. He falls backwards into the soft mud. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. Xiao Mei hurriedly threw down a rope. The filial son who was so eager to save his father. He jumped straight into the mud puddle, but one rope could not hold the weight of two people. Tai could only try to hold his son's face up with his hands, but this feeble strength had no effect at all. It was no use at all. The two of them were soon swallowed up by the mire. At the moment of crisis, Park suddenly thought of something. He immediately rushed downstairs. He picked up a stool and smashed the glass. A large amount of mud came through the window. Everyone worked together to dig through the mud. They found the father and son who had been submerged. The two were rescued by removing the mud from their mouths. At this point the drone outside finally regained its signal. The drone returns to the ground. Searchers immediately checked the footage. They confirmed that there were survivors underground, so they immediately used their parachute to drop. They dropped some food and essentials, and a satellite phone. Park quickly took the satellite phone and spoke to his wife, only to be told that his son was missing, and the last known location was in the building. Despite the firefighters' repeated advice not to do anything rash, but Park, desperate to save his son, didn't just sit there and wait for him to die. They immediately found the lift entrance. He tied a rope around his body and jumped into the lift shaft. The others held on from above. On the other end of the rope he opened the lid and entered the lift. He then tries to open the lift door. At the same time, the rescue team on the ground starts a second round of rescue. Suddenly the tilted building next to him starts to collapse. A steady stream of debris falls into the pit. Two pieces of rubble fall into the lift shaft. The ropes holding the building together on the upper floors fall off. Park, who was below, was also hit in the leg by a rock. He got up and moved the rocks away. He started looking around for his son. He was distraught at the sight of the cart on the ground. At that moment, his son's cries came from behind him. He rushed over and moved the rocks away. He found his son, Xiao-chan, hiding in the pipe. Park was so excited that he hugged his son tightly. At that moment he noticed a faint light above his shoe. It was an old woman holding a candle. Park climbed inside and tried to save her, but the grandmother wasn't going to leave. She wanted to stay and watch over her dead son. Then she gave Park a pair of shoes and a bundle of rope. He was told to carry Xiao-chan out in his shoes. After saying goodbye to the grandmother with tears in his eyes, he took his son and set off upwards. By now it was raining. This made every step he took very difficult, as he moved carefully along the outer wall, while calling out to his teammates upstairs. When he heard the call, his teammates came immediately. They plucked the sand from under the rubble. They managed to pull the father and son up. When they got out, they found a huge structure had been added to the cave. It could collapse at any moment, and the rainwater was pouring in more and more. Soon the stairs are flooded. They had to find a way to get out. So the men start collecting empty bottles, with the intention of making a simple life-saving valve. When Tai dragged in a big yellow bucket, the men crawled into a vat to stay alive. He was the only one left at the end. The man quickly puts the lid back on, letting his son bang and shout from inside. Tai said his last goodbye to his son in tears. He knew only his own sacrifice would save his son's life. The water soon flooded the area. The building stuck above fell. The vat is sinking fast under the pressure. As the pressure builds, the vat tumbles out of the side and starts to float up. But just as it gets halfway up, it's stopped by a pile of wires, so the people inside begin to crash. Finally, after a few big jumps, the vat breaks free and continues to float. But the next thing you know, you hit a piece of rebar. A large piece of rebar is lodged in the barrel. The crowd pushed out as hard as they could, but it was hard for them to push from inside. Then there was a thumping sound from outside, and it was Tai. He's not dead yet. He's found the oxygen tank. At this moment he was kicking the vat with his foot. The men inside are pushing out as hard as they can. Tai's final thrust. He finally managed to separate the barrel from the steel bar. The water instantly shot through the hole where the steel had flowed down. They couldn't cover it up. Finally, Xiao Shuai punched through the hole, using his own arm as a plunger, successfully blocking the breach. Outside, Tai tried to grab hands with him, but the vat was floating too fast. Desperate, Tai gradually sinks. At the last moment, the rope on the vat hooks onto one of Tai's feet. He is carried upwards rapidly by the barrel. He finally makes it to the surface, but the vat began to fill with water. The lid could only be opened from the outside. The people inside the barrel were at their wits' end. As the water level rose to halfway, at the critical moment a figure reappears. Tai used his last strength to open the lid. At the same time, rescuers spotted them on the monitor. In the end, after they were rescued. Old Park had struggled for years to get a loan to settle in the city, despite the collapse of his house, but thankfully, his beloved family were safe and sound. They also redefined the meaning of home.